magazine, or outlet, I should say, rather. Christine, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Hold on one sec. I have some background noise.
Experimentation, and it was a terrific education.
Let me see if I can just
experience. And I've attended quite a few.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to start over fresh.
Okay.
Today, we're talking to Crunchbase news writer Christine Hall all about Crunchbase News, what they cover, why they cover it, and how you can get featured in this high authority news media outlet. Christine, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Crunchbase News is a very exclusive, high-profile news outlet covering startups, private equity, the private sector, private companies, and a Crunchbase News article can literally put your company on the map with respect to investors and mainstream media. So stay with us and find out what makes them tick. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe and like to this video. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and like this video for access to more briefings with top-tier journalists. And if this is your first time here, we do this almost every Wednesday. It's free, and you can sign up at ericschwartzman.com/earned media. Now, digital marketing is a mystery to a lot of people. Don't let it be to your boss, your boyfriend, or your in-laws this holiday season. Download the new Essential Digital Marketing Skills Report and get a cheat sheet for how to explain digital marketing to people outside the bubble who have no clue. So they won't get frustrated and you won't feel stupid. And you can download that at ericschwartzman.com/essential skills. You can see which 12 essential skills you'll need to be successful in digital marketing in 2021. They're listed in order of importance. And you can finally explain to your grandpa, your clients, and your boss what a digital marketer does. Again, you can download it at ericschwartzman.com/essential skills. And I also want to mention Talkwalker, which just released the 2021 Social Media Trends Report. It's a deep dive into social media marketing strategies that will be most effective in 2021 based on interviews with influencers and research from the Social Media Monitoring Intelligence Platform. It's an amazing report. You don't want to miss it. And you can download that at ericschwartzman.com/Talkwalker. Our guest today is Christine Hall. She's a journalist reporting on startups and venture capital at Crunchbase News, which covers the innovation ecosystem through deeply reported, data-driven journalism on private markets, startups, founders, and investors. They're almost 3 years old. And although they're owned by Crunchbase, which is a public database of private companies, their journalism and decisions about editorial coverage are completely independent. Christine, welcome to the Earned Media Podcast.
Thank you.
Tell us about Crunchbase News.
Yeah, so you kind of hit it, but we're all about data-driven journalism, basically tapping into the Crunchbase database to round out our typical funding announcements and feature stories.
If you had to describe the editorial personality of Crunchbase News, what does he or she look like? What does she like? What does she dislike?
Yeah, I think that, there are 5 writers that work with me, or there are 5 of us that are writers, and we all kind of have different expertise. Everyone has covered startups in a past journalism life, are really intuitive to, what they do. And, we've kind of made it easy on ourselves in the past couple of months by getting into like a beat system. And so all of us kind of cover different things. So depending on, like, for example, I cover, financial services, e-commerce, all things healthcare, agriculture, and food tech. And so those are the, startups that I'm looking into and the stories that I'm covering about investments into that space. And so that's basically who we are.
So you guys are organized based with beats. Everybody covers something different.
Yes. And that's new for this year. Like when I started back in April, and we were just kind of, as people would just pitch us, that's how we would choose our stories. But now we're more kind of honed in and focused on those separate areas.
So, this is a question from Terry Kelman in Thousand Oaks. So, given the number of companies that you cover, I mean, how do you figure out what to cover? Because obviously the database covers all deals. I mean, you can go to
Right.
Crunchbase, you can look up a company, you can see how many rounds of funding they had. If
Mhm.
there's any announcements, they'll be up there. But you're selective about what you guys decide to write about. How do you decide
Yeah.
what to write about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to, is it of interest to us? Is it, something that is really disrupting that certain industry? I don't want to necessarily say it's a big round because I cover funding news as low as a $1 million seed round. So it's just a matter of our personal likes, and if it's something that we think is going to make for a good story.
Would you guys cover an angel round that was maybe a couple hundred grand or something smaller?
No, we don't cover that kind of a thing. Just I usually say that the $1 million seed round is about the lowest that we'll go.
Right. Unless, of course, the person making the angel was a name brand, then maybe you would or no. Or is
I
that a
that's
hard and
that's a
fast
good
one?
question. Yeah, that's a good question. Usually it's kind of a hard and fast no, but I think it would just depend.
Talk to us about the reach that Crunchbase News has.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different things. So in addition to the database, which millions of people use, we have a daily newsletter that goes out to like tens of thousands of subscribers, as well as we started what we call our briefing, which is basically kind of the breaking news that goes on throughout the day that we necessarily can't write an entire story on, but we still think is relevant to our readers.
What's an example of something like that you broke recently?
I think a lot of it is, when let's see, for example, that's a good, you put me on the spot here. No, I'm kidding. The For example, I think I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. I think it's called Lala Move, was a company that raised $500 million that was announced this morning. They're a online logistics for on-demand deliveries. They raised $515 million Series E, which was not something that we were able to cover beforehand. So we would put it, that's something that we put in today's briefing to just kind of,
That's some cash.
cover it.
That's a big number.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big number, man. How
Yes.
much? 500 and
$515 million.
wow.
Yeah.
Huge. Series E. I'm
Yes.
reading this book now. It's the
Yeah.
story of the WeWork guy. It's called Billion Dollar Loser
Oh, yeah.
by Reeves Weedman. And I heard Jason Calacanis interviewing the writer on his podcast. And I picked it up, and I was kind of interested in the WeWork story. I don't really
Mhm.
know it. And
Mhm.
it's interesting, how there was no numbers. It was just basically charisma,
Mhm.
charm, and growth.
Mhm.
But in terms of like the underlying, financials, there really was no argument that this was a good investment ever, despite the fact that, they raised as much money as they did. I mean,
Mhm.
is that the way it works? Is it pretty much, I mean, I guess it is, right? It's pretty much about Trump. It's not about
Yeah.
whether or not it's profitable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the, especially a lot of VCs that I've talked to recently, a lot of them are early stage investors. And so all they can go off of is that charisma from the founder. Does the founder have a good head on their shoulders? Does it sound like they, can lead the business in the right direction? Because most of the companies are not profitable, so they can only show maybe customer reach, or growing a customer base and things like that, but really can't show too many financials a year in. So really, you're right, it does kind of follow on charisma.
So, I mean, g- taking that a step further, do you get a lot of attention from PR people who are trying to sort of pitch you top spin ideas?
Oh yes, oh yes, all day every day.
Okay, and so talk to me about, like, how do you evaluate whether or not something's worth paying attention to or not?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I mean, it probably doesn't hurt if it's a bigger round. You might say, oh, this is, pretty significant. Let's do this. But, I think, A lot of it lately, because of the way that we're doing our beats, I kind of think almost anything really at this point is something interesting. If it sounds like, I kind of, whenever I get a pitch or something, I usually always go to into the Crunchbase database and look up the company and see if they're even there. If they are, see kind of what's been happening, where, have they had other rounds, like if it's a Series B, like take a look at the Series A, take a look at the seed, who's been investing in the company, and kind of go from there.
So you basically use the VCs who have bought in as a proxy for whether or not they're real.
Yeah.
You figure if these guys did their homework and they put in their money, it's news.
Yes. Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. So when I look at the website, I see for Crunchbase News, I see these topics: business, COVID-19, public, data, liquidity, crypto, Proust, diversity, venture, and startups. So can you sort of give us just a quick tour of each of those topics and what they mean? I don't even know what Proust is.
Yeah, you're right. I was looking on
I thought Proust was a
Yeah.
was he a writer or a philosopher?
I think it looks like Proust was like a column that somebody had from somebody who was way before me. There before me, and so I think it was a column that they were working on. But usually with the I can kind of start from the bottom, really. Like startups are a certain we think it's kind of like a younger company. So it kind of just depends on your definition of it. But I think a business or company stops being what a quote unquote startup after a certain period of time. So maybe after a certain number of years, or like a certain raise, like maybe if they're getting into more of like the Series A, Series B and beyond, like I kind of stopped considering them a startup and more of like a business. And so on the topics, like I would choose they were say founded in like 2014, I would choose business over as a category versus the startups. But COVID-19 is kind of what you think, all of our coverage of COVID-19, which is a lot, because I feel like I put COVID-19 in like every story that I've written since April, but kind of covers a lot of the different things that we've talked about. Public is public companies, data is the data that we have writers that write specifically about data trends, and that's where that goes. Let's see, crypto is obviously like following Bitcoin and other startups that are in that cryptocurrency space. And then diversity is as it sounds, we are writing more about founders, entrepreneurs, startups, investors that are really kind of going after that diversity, equity, and inclusion piece.
And then what about adventure is what you would think it is?
Yeah, venture is what you think it is. Yeah. So usually if it's a funding round, I always choose venture as one of the
So let me ask you, sort of, are you looking at the analytics behind your site to see what stories get the most action?
We do talk. We talk about it at our weekly meetings. What stories are getting the most play? So yeah, we definitely do talk about that.
Can you make any generalizations about which of these topics tend to be the most popular topics for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, more so than the topics, we usually just do the story itself. So sometimes, it just depends. Like we used to do a lot of funding store announcements. And so we're kind of doing those, but then in addition, kind of getting more into the feature pieces. And so a lot of their stories that get played just kind of depends on, what's going on. A $1 million funding round sometimes is one of the most read stories, for the week that we talk about. And it's we don't go, oh my goodness, how in the world did that happen? But we that's why we kind of don't really just go by the funding amount, because that $1 million funding round could get just as equal play on social media or on our website or in our newsletter than that Lala Move $515 million round.
In terms of sort of, I guess, your KPIs, or not just you, but really any writer at Crunchbase News, what would make a story successful and what would make a story a failure?
I mean, I think successful is just I think there's kind of the story behind it. Like I don't necessarily always ask the background of every, founder that I interview, but if you can kind of provide that color, I think that it really makes for a really successful story. Stories that don't kind of make it. I mean, I think we get a lot of pitches, for things that we just don't write about, that's every reporter gets that. I am not in the, I am not unique in that aspect. But, so I think that stories that aren't successful really, if I'm kind of bored writing it, I would say, which doesn't happen often, but it does happen where I'm kind of writing it. And at the time that I did the interview, I thought it was okay. But then when I sat down to write it, I was like, oh, wow, this was not as great of an interview as I thought it was going to be. And so if it's kind of if I think it's boring, I think I tend to write it boring as well. So, I try not to, but sometimes that just happens. So I think if you kind of looked at some stories, maybe you could figure out which ones those are. Hope not, though.
From more of a hard and fast numbers side, I mean, when you guys are having your weekly meeting, is there kind of like, hey, if we got this many views, or if we got this much engagement, it was successful, or if we didn't, like, when you, from a numerical standpoint or an analytical standpoint, are there specific targets you're trying to hit?
Yeah, we don't necessarily have like page views that we're trying to hit. I mean, we do talk about it, but we don't say, oh, hey, all of your stories need to at least get 1,000 views or something like that. We've never had that conversation, but there are, some indicators that we try to meet, such as, getting people from our stories over to the Crunchbase database kind of to take a look and things like that. So there are, metrics there that we kind of follow and try to meet. But, other than that, we don't talk too much about kind of the page views and overall of what our stories did.
So, so from time to time, the media is accused of behaving like a pack with a herd mentality, all chasing the same sort of, trends.
Yeah.
To what extent are you guys looking at, what's trending on Twitter or what's trending on Reddit to try to sort of get some editorial direction of what people are interested in?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have we like throughout the day, we kind of, we do have like an RSS feed of stories that come in, and we'll discuss stories that we see like on Twitter and things like that. But it's not really a driver of the content that we do.
Got it. Yeah. Do you know anything about that feed? Like, what is that feed? What are some of the, let me give you a more specific question. Who are your outlets that you're following that you're like, oh, you know what, these are the ones I look at and I pay attention to them?
Yeah, usually we pay close attention to like the Information, TechCrunch. I was trying to think some of the other ones. Yeah, we do, Axios. We pay attention to like Fortune, Forbes, all those kinds of outlets. We do pay attention to that on a regular basis.
Talk to me about sort of the feature coverage, because you do these VC reports.
Yes.
Talk to us about these VC reports.
Yeah. So we have just really talented, I have some really talented coworkers in Janae and Joanna that really take a look at the data that's going on within Crunchbase, and write to those. And so they'll do like for example, US and European quarterly reports that talk about deal flow into different sectors, how much funding has gone in, like dollar volume, certain number, like the top rounds for that quarter. And that's pretty much what's in most of the those VC reports.
Got it. So
Yeah.
those are basically looking at the data behind what's happening in Crunchbase as a whole and reporting on those trends as news.
Yes.
Got it. Got it. So talk to us about your capacity for coverage. How many stories are you guys filing daily, weekly?
Yeah. So we are kind of responsible for at least one kind of newsy story, one, sort of breaking news daily story a day, and then one feature story per week. And so when I say feature story, it's usually on, talking about kind of following the trends and things, investments that are going on in our specific beats. And, kind of talking about sort of the investments, the companies behind those numbers. For example, I think the the one that I wrote for this week, I was trying to pull it up so that I can speak more eloquently about it. But I did one about, sorry, I'm losing my spot here. But I did one a little while ago about just kind of based off a conversation that I had with a venture capitalist, and he was talking about how, fintech companies, financial services companies are, had unbundled a lot of the financial services, a lot of the banking services that we saw, and kind of were becoming like a master of one thing. And so but now they're kind of turning around and actually rebundling. And so they're kind of taking a lot of those different services and coming back so that they can be a more holistic option for consumers.
In terms of the impact of the pandemic on investment, any sort of big generalizations, takeaways from that?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
The impact of the pandemic on investments in startups and
Yeah.
and mid and late stage companies.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I joined in April, and we had a discussion at that time. We thought maybe investment would slow down, that we might not have as many funding announcements to cover, and just what should we do instead? Like, how should we approach covering startup funding and startup companies if this were to happen? And what was interesting that happened was that we didn't really get to that point. We had it was kind of the exact opposite. Like, it didn't slow down at all. Like, I on any given day, I think I wrote as little as 2 stories a day, and then some days I was writing like 8 funding stories. So I was having to actually turn pitches away, because I just was like, I have too many. I only have so many hours in the day to do interviews and things like that, and so we would have to do it. So I think that I had started out the year asking, when we would do a funding story, I would start out asking, how COVID-19 was impacting the companies. And, depending on the industry that they were in, COVID was either, like a momentary blip on the radar for them, or it was something that really, caused them to take a pause and kind of look and see what's going on. And no one wants to be the person who says the global pandemic helped their business, but really for a lot of companies, it did. They were able to raise funding in the early days of the pandemic, having, never met their investor in person. Like, for example, when people stopped going into stores, brands had to figure out how to engage with their customers online. And so, I was writing about a ton of e-commerce technology companies that were adding, clients left and right because of what was going on.
So every company has a website, which
Mhm.
means every company is in the media business
Mhm.
because a website is digital media.
Right.
And the experience people have on your website directly impacts your reputation.
Mhm.
I'd say it actually shapes your perception of that company or brand.
Mhm.
When I go to a website that has, or when I go to a company's website, if it's difficult to use, my impression is that they're a dinosaur, they're out of date. And
Yeah.
and if they're out of date with a bad website, I figure, well, they're probably going to be difficult to work with.
Mhm.
Probably their digital systems are out of date too.
Mhm.
However, they
Mhm.
take an order or their
Yeah.
billing, they're going to have problems with these people because they're not
Yeah.
up to date. Now, it's tough to keep a website current, particularly if you're reliant on IT to update your site.
Totally.
So, if you're in PR or marketing, or if you're an entrepreneur, but you're a non technical person
Mhm.
and you want an easy way to keep your site current, check out IPR software. They've got a super easy to use digital reputation management platform, and you can use it without writing a stitch of code. And this is really cool. It's a special offer for earned media podcast listeners. If you go to ericschwartzman.com/IPR software and tell them that you heard about them on the Earned Media podcast, they'll give you your first month free. So go to ericschwartzman.com, IPR software, check it out, and see how much easier your life can be. For you, Christine,
Mhm.
what types of stories are must cover events for you?
Well, it seems like oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I was kind of thinking, really it's is it a fun is it a fun pitch? Does the PR person seem really excited about talking about this company, that they're like, this person has a great past, you can ask them this and this. And that's kind of what I look for, is really that interest from the beginning. Like if I read through the pitch and I'm like, yes, I love this, that I think that makes for a good story.
So let's talk about the pitch. What makes a good pitch?
Yeah. So I think for Crunchbase News in particular, we're very focused on, essentially startup companies announcing new rounds of venture capital. So the pitch really needs to be someone is announcing a new round of capital. So if I get pitches that get right to the point and say, they're announcing this on this day, would you like to cover it? And then I get pitches that are like, had to have been like 2 pages of a document that they copied and pasted into an email. And I never get to the part about whether or not the company is raising money. And so I kind of debate with myself, should I email back and say, hey, is this company also raising money in addition to whatever it is that you're talking about? Or do I just delete and, move on with my day? So it's kind of a constant struggle of how I figure out, should I engage with this person or just let it go?
How many pitches do you get a day?
Wow. I would say I get at least 50 pitches a day.
Do you read them all?
I do. I'm one of those rare people that I do read the pitch. I do open up the email and take a read, and see what's going on.
Is it a read or a scan?
I think it is. I do scan for certain things. Like I do scan for that what looks like a funding raise. Like if they put, this company is raising 10 million, 10 million dollar Series A round. I do kind of look for that. I kind of scan, but I literally do for the most part read the email.
How many of those 50, generally speaking, what percentage are just completely off target?
Oh, I would say at least half. At least
Okay.
half I have to get rid of, yeah.
All right. So you get rid of, and then of that other 25,
Mhm.
what makes a winning pitch versus which ones, aren't going to cut it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think first off, if it's on my beat, because I send a lot of pitches to my colleagues that are not, that are so, some that are interesting. Like I wish I could cover a lot of the stories, because they're just very interesting, where it's like an interesting company. A winning pitch, I think, for me is kind of going back to, um is this interesting? Does this sound like it's disrupting the industry? Can I get an investor to also talk about it? Have we covered stories like this in the past? Can I go back into our archive of stories and find some competitors that have also raised, and kind of I can add some of that. What kind of market are you going into? Is it one that has the potential to be double digit growth for the next 3 years? That things like that, where I can add other things. If I can, we're working on adding more information from our Crunchbase database, so that we could say, oh, this company is a mental health startup. Well, I can go into our database and kind of search for all the mental health companies that have received funding in the last 5 years, create a list of it, and put it in there and say, hey, over the last 5 years, 200 companies that are focused on mental health have raised venture capital funding in the last 5 years, and investors have invested $1 billion into those companies during that time, and really provide that kind of that extra information.
Do you like that kind of a pitch? If someone comes at you and says, hey, you guys have been writing about this sector, you wrote about these 3 companies, I got this other company, they're a competitor, they just raised a round.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a home run pitch?
I mean, I think so. I think that it's when we can say, oh, the following these companies recently, and we can go bullet point of these companies that here they raised, and even better if it's companies that we had actually covered ourselves. It's great to be able to, I love pitches like that, where they've I think, kind of going back to the original question, like, winning pitch is people who've done their research, people who know what Crunchbase News does and what kind of story that we want.
And remind us what your beat is again.
Yeah. So my beats are financial services, e-commerce, healthcare and wellness, agriculture, and food tech.
If someone is not listening to this podcast, how would they figure that out?
We actually have it on our webpage. So we have under the About Us tab, there's About Crunchbase News, and then when you click on that, it talks about all of the reporters and what we cover.
And it has what everybody covers. So nobody ever sort of oversteps their beat if they really want to write about something?
Not really. I mean, I think we're really good about asking each other, hey, I got this pitch. I don't, like, for example, like, I got this pitch, are you able to cover it? If not, I don't have that many stories, can I cover it for today or something like that? So I think we're really good about talking to each other about, I don't think that we really infringe on anyone's beats.
What is the average length of a pitch that you get?
Oh, wow. I would say that it's usually about 5 paragraphs is the average length. So, within each paragraph is maybe like 1 or 2 sentences.
And what is that the optimum length? What's the optimum length?
I mean, I think, I think a lot of people can get it done in 2 paragraphs, to be honest with you, because really what we're focused on is funding. If it's something that's really more of a trend piece. So if you're trying to say, what's going on in investment in the certain area, then the longer, the more information, more details that I can get, the better. But for your average funding story, I think you really could get it done in 2 paragraphs. Like, this is the company, what do they do, how much are they raising, who's the investment. You don't even have to give the whole entire list, but it does help, and this is when it's running, and when, would you like to see some more information?
You guys are pretty unique in your coverage, but I guess VentureBeat would be a competitor. Yeah.
Yes.
And who else?
TechCrunch is a competitor. Really, I think all of those people that we cover, like Axios, Fortune, Forbes, The Information, all of those are competitors.
And what is your revenue model at Crunchbase News?
Can you be more specific?
How do you guys earn money?
Yeah, for like subscribers to the database and the products and services therein.
Got it. So it's not an ad supported outlet.
No.
So it's basically a value add to people who are subscribing to the database.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
don't really know anything about the subscription to that database. Let me give you a chance to plug it, because I search it, and like when I get pitches for this show for a startup, the first thing I do is I go to Crunchbase News and I look them up and see if they've closed a round. If they have, then usually I'm interested at that point.
Yeah.
But what would, if I was a subscriber, what would I get that I don't get just going in on my own?
Yeah. So if you just kind of go in, like anyone can go in and search for things, but then there's like a pro level, and that really gets you kind of the more deeper dive into things. So, if you're just on there for free, you might only see, like maybe one, like for example, like if you go in to look for a company and you're like, oh, how many other investments have they made? They might have like a seed, a series A, a series B, C, D, E, it goes up, but you might only see one of those. And so in order to see the rest, you need to be, subscribe. If you want to kind of get more into the, be able to filter through the companies, and see a lot more of the, total funding raised, all of those kinds of numbers, then you would need to, up that subscription.
And that's unique, right? No one else has that.
No, yeah, no, exactly.
No one else has a database.
Exactly, yeah.
Talk to us about like the worst pitch you've ever gotten.
Oh my goodness. The worst pitch I've ever gotten. Wow. I think there's more than one. Like I can't really, this is bad, but I think some of the worst pitches that we get are really from company founders who just kind of come in and just basically talk about themselves and how great they are. I think that your story is more about you and more about the company, what it's doing, how have you been able to lead the company, to the funding and work with people and that type of thing. And I think that those are really some of the worst pitches that I've ever had, is just from people who come in and they, hey, we're great, we've done this and this and this and this, do you want to cover us? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe not.
It's interesting that it's that they're the pitches that come from founders. That's surprising to me.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of I think that not every company has the PR person. So I'm not saying that all founders pitch like that. I'm just saying that there are certain founders who like to work with people, like to work with journalists, and give it a try, give pitching a try. So it's not all, but it's just a very certain number that I've come across that are like that.
What is your policy on embargoes?
We are A-okay with those. If you say that you want, you have a funding story or any kind of story, and it's not going to run for 2 weeks, we will totally honor the embargo.
And is that a policy of the outlet, or is that you personally?
No, it's a policy of the outlet. Like we all honor embargoes. If you send us something, even if it's something that I can't cover, like my colleagues will also honor the embargo if they're the ones that end up covering it.
What happens if someone leaks?
Oh, like one of us leaks?
No, if
some, that's a good question. I've actually had that happen a couple of times, where the PR person will get back to me and say, I'm so sorry, someone leaked this. So go ahead and, and do it, go ahead and report it as well. Most PR people are not happy when that happens.
How do you feel? How do you guys feel about it when that happens?
I think for the most part, I usually, yeah, it kind of puts a crimp in my day if I haven't already written the story. Like usually, we kind of ask for embargoes only because it gives us time to do interviews with the founders and the investors and maybe, anyone else that we want to interview for the story. So usually I have all that done and it's just a matter of writing the story. So, I mean, I have kind of all the components and so I can kind of, maybe stop what I'm doing, but it's not my favorite thing.
And what is your policy on exclusives?
Yeah, we love those too. I've been writing a lot of exclusives lately for startup companies that are announcing their rounds. We don't have to have those, but it helps if we can have them.
So I noticed that in your stories, the links all point to listings in the Crunchbase database.
Yes.
Is that an editorial policy, or you never link externally?
Yes. No, I have, yeah, it just depends on if the company is in the database. So we might link, for example, if it's a company that, is a brand new company, they just launched, and we're maybe covering their seed round. If they don't have a profile, we will link to their website. But I think what ends up happening is that when we do post that story, we have the people on the data side who take that story and then create a profile based on that. And so then it will link to I believe it will then link to their Crunchbase profile.
So there is no editorial policy against linking to external third-party sites?
Correct. Yeah. It's like a lot of times, there might not be a person like there's a person in a specific story and they might not have a Crunchbase profile. So usually our kind of number two is like their LinkedIn profile to link to.
Yeah. In terms of exclusives, would you entertain an exclusive in exchange for a link?
You mean for like somebody wanting us to link to their website versus their profile?
Well, let's say they're trying to search optimize their site for a certain keyword. And they said to you, you know what, I'm going to give this story to you exclusively, but I need this keyword linked over to my site.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that I've had that question come up before. It just kind of depends. Like, it might depend on if the name of the company has like 5 of similar names in our database. We might get a little bit more specific there just to be like, this is the one that we're talking about.
Well, the
But
link
not
is
necessarily.
in that case is never a branded term. It's always an unbranded term that the company wants to rank for. So if they compete
Right.
in a category, they may want to rank for a keyword that might get
Yeah.
searched by someone trying to solve the problem that their product or service solves,
Right.
but who don't know their name.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I've never personally done that, but I don't know if
Vehicle
that's
routing software.
Yeah, I've never.
Hey, I need a link for vehicle routing software. I'll give you the story exclusive. I need the
Yeah,
link.
I've never been asked that.
So funny, man. It'd be seems like such a great way to SEO. And
Yeah, true.
as long as it's relevant for the story, no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
So I want to open it up to to the folks that are listening. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask, or should we call it a day and get on with our holiday? With our, this is the day before Christmas Eve, and I imagine everyone is sort of looking at what they're going to start cooking right now. So, is there anyone that has any questions that they'd like to ask Christine before we let her go? While you're thinking about that, I will mention once again the Talkwalker 2021 Social Media Trends Report, which you can download at ericschwartzman.com/Talkwalker, and the 2021 Essential Social Media Skills Report, which you can download at ericschwartzman.com/essential skills. If you're responsible for managing your brand's online reputation, you can get more information about IPR software at ericschwartzman.com/IPR software. Again, if you tell them you heard about them on the Earned Media podcast, you get the first month free. Join us next week for the final episode of the quarter, where we will be talking to David Pogue. He was the New York Times weekly tech columnist from 2000 to 2013. He's a 5-time Emmy winner, best-selling author, TED speaker, and host of 20 Nova Science specials on PBS. And he's got a really interesting new book coming out that he's going to tell us about. And we're going to talk to him about where technology is headed. That is next Wednesday at noon. We do have one final question here from Terry Kelman. He asks, where do you think they're headed in the development as a news site?
That's a very good question. I think if one of the areas that, we've been talking about is, because right now we do a lot of funding announcements and, things like that. And we have discussed, kind of where do we want to take this in the future? And so I think that you're going to see from Crunchbase News, very soon, I think more so than in the future, I think that you're going to see, kind of more analysis, more of that data-driven journalism, taking looking at more trends, looking at more, what's going on in the investment in this space and kind of where the Crunchbase numbers are taking us, really. So you're going to see a lot more of that.
Christine Hall, contributing writer at Crunchbase News. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.